Hello, my name is Harold Halfton and welcome to Archaeological Minecraft. I'm a former archaeologist who enjoys playing Minecraft and thought it would be fun to combine the two. In today's episode, we'll be talking about toilets and latrines throughout history and how they can be a treasure trove of information to archaeologists. So, right at the outset, let me just say that in today's video, we'll be talking about cesspits, latrines, toilets, and the waste that people leave behind when they, use the facilities. If that's going to gross you out, then maybe this isn't the video for you. However, if you want to learn about how people in history took care of their bodily waste, then boy do I have a video for you, and along the way, we'll be recreating what some of these historic bathrooms and sewers looked like in Minecraft. The other thing I want to point out is that these places are all called by many different names. Some may call them bathrooms, washrooms, latrines, toilets, the water closet, or the loo, and in this video I will mostly be calling the room people do their business in a bathroom or a latrine, and the thing they sit on, the toilet. For most of human history, when people needed to do their business, they just popped away from their hunter-gatherer party, or if they were out traveling or tending their fields, they would perhaps duck behind a bush or a tree and do what they needed to do. Often, I don't suppose they really went out of their way to obscure themselves from other people's view too much, as ancient and historic people had a much different relationship to privacy than we do in our modern age. In fact, privacy was very much a luxury, and the vast majority of people didn't possess this until last century, where people tend to have their own bedrooms, put fences around their backyards, and go to the bathroom in rooms that have doors. In fact, I wouldn't imagine most people in today's age much think about what happens to their waste once they flush it, but in ancient and historical societies, that was very much top of mind, and something that most everyone dealt with multiple times a day. Getting back to history, if you didn't simply do your business out in the forest or in a hedgerow by a field, then most people simply used a pot, or in other words a chamber pot, where you would do your business, and then later head out to wherever you or your community dumped your waste. That might simply be a communal open-air cesspit on the outskirts of town or community. The waste from the cesspit would then be collected and used in the fields as fertilizer. It might also be that your community was near a river or a large lake or perhaps the ocean, and people might have dumped their waste right into there. Sanitation's another thing that was often quite different than in the modern age, with our modern understanding of germ theory. Okay, so beyond that general info, let's jump into some specifics regarding how some civilizations and societies dealt with the human waste differently to the above. As cities developed, people often lost the ability to simply walk to the edge of their small settlement and dump their waste in a cesspit or clean out their chamber pots in the local river or lake. And so we see some communities and cities try and work through these problems in different ways. If we go way back in time to the Bronze Age, around 2600 to 1000 BC to the Minoan Civilization, which was located on Crete, an island to the south of Greece, we see one of the first instances of people creating what might be called a sewer system. In the Minoan capital city of Knossos, it was thought that the population was around 100,000 people, and given that the average person produces about a pound of poo a day, that's around half a kilogram. That works out to the citizens of the city producing around 45,359 kilograms or 50 tons of human waste every day that all needed to go somewhere. As mentioned before, some of that no doubt was collected and used as fertilizer in the fields and crops, but 50 tons of poo a day is way too much to collect and move, and so they came up with another way to get rid of it. So what did they do? They invented flushing toilets and a sewer system, or at least the toilets in the palace flushed. I doubt every resident of the city was so lucky. How this worked is that there were catch basins that collected the rainwater in the palace, and then a system of ceramic water pipes were laid into the floor. When someone did their business, they would let some of the water run and flush their waste away through the piping system, where all the pipes would eventually join up into an underground channel, which would send their waste out into the ocean. They even went so far as to build in cleanouts, kind of like modern-day manhole covers, so the system could be properly maintained. And just imagine all of this some 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, not long after when the Egyptian pyramids were being built. Another civilization that existed in the Indus Valley from around 2600 to 1900 BC was the Harappan Civilization. In their city of Harappa, in what is now in Punjab, Pakistan, they also built sewer systems and underground piping to wash away human waste from their city of around 23,000 residents. They built clay brick houses with individual toilets that were connected to clay-lined gutters that were covered over with wooden boards. The boards were kept in place with stones that could be lifted away for maintenance of the system. These gutters were designed to have a slight slant so water could flow through the gutter and wash away the waste. Similar to what was mentioned with the Minoan sewers, the gutter system at Harappa also contained a manhole-like system where larger clay-lined cesspools were accessible via shafts and steps leading down to allow them to be periodically cleaned out. Zooming forward in time around 1 to 2,000 years, we come to our good friends the Romans. I touched on this a bit in my video on the shops in the Roman city of Pompeii, and I made mention of how shopkeepers would place a container for people to pee in and how urine was taxed and used in the garment cleaning industry. Beyond that, however, the Romans employed a couple of different kinds of latrines and had extensive sewer systems in their cities. The Greek historian Strabo said they were, quote, big enough for wagons loaded with hay to pass and for rivers to flow through them. Roman cities contained public facilities for people to utilize while they were out and about. These were called fornicae. They were often located next to the public bathhouses or other areas where there was an easy to tap into water source that could be connected to the city's sewer system. Some of these fornicae were built from marble, but don't think of these as fancy places, and I myself might have taken a pass on using them. On the inside, there were long benches with holes carved into them for seating, where people would sit and do their business. There were no dividers. People just pulled up their togas and sat right next to one another on the bench. Remember, privacy is a modern concept. They often had low ceilings with small windows, so would likely have been pretty dark. To clean themselves after finishing, they used a sponge on the end of a stick that would be placed in a gutter that contained running water. Here's the thing that gets me though. Everyone didn't have their own cleaning sponge stick, so it was shared by everyone who used the fornicae. Remember, they didn't know anything about modern germ theory, or really how diseases were spread. There are ancient accounts that indicate upper-class Romans avoided using the fornicae, and I can understand why. Where possible, they would instead use a latrine in their own homes. Here's an example of this from our recent video on the Roman apartments in a city block on Pompeii. Our English word for latrine comes from the Latin word latrina, which means a toilet located in someone's private home. These latrines were often located over a cesspit that would collect the waste and be cleaned out periodically. In this location, there were some stairs leading down under the apartment, and while in my research, I couldn't locate anything that definitively spoke to what was down in that lower level. It is certainly possible that it was to access a cleanout for the cesspit under the latrine. Moving away from the Romans and jumping forward another 1,000 or so years, let's talk about the Middle Ages. This is my tower house that I built for the episode about tower houses, and here's a good example of what a bathroom would look like in the city walls or in a medieval castle or other fortification. The latrine would be located along the outer wall, and in that way, when someone used the facilities, their waste would fall by gravity down a chute and land at the bottom of the fortification. From there, it would either be collected in a cesspit, or especially if there was a moat around the fortification, it would sometimes be emptied right into that. In fact, some latrines would stick out from the outside of the wall, and so instead of the waste falling through a chute into the cesspit, it would empty right outside the fortification's walls, right under the ground or in a moat. Now, I said that at the very beginning of the video, I would cover why latrines and cesspits are so interesting and useful finds and a treasure trove to archaeologists. And to highlight the point, let me talk briefly about a specific excavation and analysis from a medieval barrel-latrine that dates to the 15th century in Worcester, England. In that find, the lower half of the barrel remained intact, as did the contents of the cesspit located under the barrel-latrine. The excavation of the cesspit allowed archaeologists to identify 20 different species of edible plants that were being eaten at that time and that place in history. Most were fruit and local plants like gooseberries and stone fruit, such as plums, but some showed more exotic fruits like grapes, maybe in the form of raisins or figs, which don't grow locally in England. This means that there were trade networks in place and that those more exotic fruits were more widely available to common soldiers than previously thought. This barrel-latrine wasn't used by noblemen, who you would think would have access to those exotic fruit, but rather was located along the city walls and seems to have been used by the local guard. Seeds and pollen from cornflower plants, wetland plants, straw and hay were also found. These would have been likely tossed down the latrine after having been used to cover the floor. Covering the floor of a room with straw or herbs kept the room smelling nice and made periodic cleaning of the floor easier. There was also pollen from beans, hemp, and borage, also known as starflower, which is an annual herb that could be used as a garnish. Other evidence of the soldiers' diet came in the way of various bones found thrown down the cesspit. This took the form of herring and eel bones, as well as chicken bones. Archaeologists were also able to find evidence of different kinds of internal parasites, as well as numerous species of beetle remains and other insect larvae. Some of those beetle and larva species came from the cesspit itself, but others were found in the wooden remains of the barrel used as the toilet. All of these kinds of evidence allows archaeologists to analyze and gain insights into the daily life of these individuals living in Worcester at the time. It helps open a window into the past so that we can better understand what these people ate, drank, how they lived, clean their physical environment, what plants or animals were common at that place in time in history, and what ailments those people lived with, all from a single toilet. Well, that wraps up this video, all about toilets and latrines throughout history and what kinds of information archaeologists can learn from studying them. Hopefully you found it interesting and weren't too grossed out. I put links in the description below around some of the articles and websites I used to research this content. Please leave me a comment if you liked or didn't like this video so I know better how I can focus on making the content you most enjoy watching. Thanks, have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.